He was just a driver, ferrying a late-night fare through the rain. But when she asked, "Are you alone tonight?" a simple question shattered the silence, hinting at a profound connection neither of them expected. The rain hammered against the windshield of Elias Thorne's sedan, a relentless, drumming crescendo that had been his solitary companion for hours. Each wiper swipe was a sigh, a rhythmic counterpoint to the low thrum of the engine as he navigated the slick, mirror-like streets of Oak Haven. At 23, Elias felt the weight of his chosen path, the stack of university textbooks awaiting his attention back in his small apartment, the looming tuition fees all pressing down on him. This late-night driving, a necessary grind, was meant to propel him towards a future that seemed perpetually just out of reach. His phone buzzed, cutting through the monotonous symphony of the storm. A new rideshare request, Atherton Row. The name on the app, S. Blackwood, was an anonymous digital tag, a waypoint in the endless churn of his night. He tapped to accept, the glowing map on his dashboard outlining a route through the older, more affluent parts of Oak Haven, where grand, ivy-clad Victorians often hid behind imposing gates. As he turned onto Atherton Row, the infrequent streetlights, blurred by the mist, cast long, distorted shadows that danced like specters. He slowed, his gaze sweeping the ornate house numbers until he found 172. It was a magnificent, almost forbidding edifice, its dark stone facade softened only by patches of clinging ivy. A single, warm light spilled from a downstairs window, a welcoming beacon in the otherwise gloomy landscape. On the wide covered porch, a solitary figure stood huddled beneath a small, dark umbrella, a silhouette against the amber glow. Elias pulled the car to the curb, the tires hissing on the soaked asphalt. The time, he noted automatically, was 11:17 p.m. The woman approached his car with a deliberate, almost unhurried grace, her movements fluid despite the downpour. She reached for the back passenger door, then hesitated, her eyes in a fleeting moment catching his in the rearview mirror. There was something in that brief glance, a profound weariness perhaps, or a deep, unsettling stillness that belied the late hour. Instead of opening the back door, she surprised him by pulling open the front passenger door. "Is this all right?" she asked, her voice a soft contralto surprisingly rich and clear cutting through the relentless drumming of the rain. "My destination isn't far and I prefer the front." Elias, caught off guard, managed a quick, almost clumsy nod, a faint blush creeping up his neck. It was unusual, a departure from the unwritten rules of his late-night profession. She settled into the seat with an almost ethereal quietness, carefully folding her umbrella and placing it in the footwell. A subtle, elegant scent, something floral and warm, filled the confined space of the car, a stark contrast to the usual faint scent of stale coffee and damp upholstery that clung to the seats. She was older than he'd first assumed, perhaps in her late 30s or early 40s, though her features retained a striking, almost timeless beauty. Her dark hair, pulled back loosely, framed a face that, despite the faint lines around her eyes, exuded an aura of refined composure. Her simple, dark trench coat seemed to absorb the dim light, hinting at an expensive, understated dress beneath. She radiated a quiet dignity, almost regal, yet there was an undeniable, almost heartbreaking fragility about her, a vulnerability that made him instinctively want to tread carefully, to speak in hushed tones. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little louder now, though still soft. "It's quite a night out there." "It is," Elias agreed, shifting the car into drive. Her destination, the Whisperwood Gallery, a contemporary art space on the other side of town, seemed an odd choice for this hour, especially as it usually closed by 6 in the evening. He decided against comment, focusing instead on navigating the slick, reflective streets. A comfortable silence settled between them, a contemplative space broken only by the low hum of the engine and the insistent drumming of the rain. He found himself stealing glances at her in his periphery. She was looking out the window, her profile etched against the fleeting streetlights, her expression a careful mask. What was she doing out so late? Why the gallery? His mind, usually consumed by academic assignments and financial anxieties, drifted, weaving speculative narratives around the enigmatic woman beside him. He noticed the delicate curve of her neck, the way her long, elegant fingers rested on her lap. There was a faint tremor in them, he thought, or perhaps it was just a trick of the passing light. As they passed under the imposing arch of the Old Town Bridge, she slowly turned her head, her gaze settling on him. He felt the unexpected weight of it, not intrusive, but curious, assessing, almost searching. "Are you always out this late, driver?" she asked, her voice a low murmur, barely audible above the rain's persistent rhythm. "Most nights, yes," Elias replied, attempting to keep his tone professional, detached. "Trying to make ends meet. Student life, you know." She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I understand. It's commendable, your dedication." She paused, her eyes still on him, and then continued, her voice imbued with a quiet, almost melancholic resonance. "It's a lonely road sometimes, isn't it? This city after dark." Elias felt a prickle of surprise. It was an unusual, disarmingly personal observation from a passenger. He considered her words for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted, choosing his words carefully. "But it has its moments, too." "Quiet. Peaceful, in a way." She offered a faint, fleeting smile, a ghost of an expression that softened her features for a mere second. "Peaceful, yes. Or simply empty." Her gaze drifted back to the window, losing itself in the watery reflections of the passing city lights. He felt a peculiar pull, a desire to bridge the silence, to ask her about herself, about the gallery, about the loneliness she spoke of. But he held back, adhering to the unspoken protocol of his profession. The rest of the drive unfolded in a similar pattern, a comfortable quiet, punctuated by brief, polite exchanges. He learned her first name was Serafina, though she offered no surname, and he didn't press. She spoke briefly of the gallery, mentioning a late-night private viewing that had run over, explaining her unexpected nocturnal journey. He found himself listening intently to the subtle inflections in her voice, trying to decipher the unsaid. He noticed how she occasionally sighed, a soft, almost imperceptible exhalation that carried a hint of sadness, a burden he couldn't name. As they neared the Whisperwood Gallery, a modern angular structure of glass and steel that stood out amidst the older brick facades, the rain finally began to ease, tapering off into a light drizzle. Elias pulled up to the curb, the gallery's front entrance glowing with soft, recessed lighting. The street was deserted, no other cars, just the shimmering wet asphalt and the quiet hum of the distant city. "Here we are," he announced, the words feeling strangely inadequate, a paltry conclusion to an unexpectedly compelling journey. Serafina turned to him fully, her movements fluid and graceful. Her dark eyes, luminous in the dim light of the car, held his gaze, unwavering. There was a depth to them, an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. He felt a strange current pass between them, a silent communication, a recognition of something unspoken, something beyond the transactional. "Thank you, Elias," she said, using his name for the first time, a small detail that resonated within him. He hadn't realized she'd remembered it. "You've been very kind." He nodded, unsure how to respond. "My pleasure, ma'am." She continued to look at him, a subtle shift in her expression, a hint of something unrevealed, something held back. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to say something more, something significant, something that hovered on the precipice of revelation. The air in the car thickened, charged with an invisible energy, a silent anticipation. He waited, his heart thrumming a little faster than usual, a quiet crescendo building within him. "And then," she asked, her voice a mere whisper that barely registered above the lingering gentle patter of the rain, "are you alone tonight?" The question hung in the air, unexpected and disarmingly personal, a delicate thread woven into the tapestry of the night. It wasn't a proposition, not overtly. It was something else entirely, an inquiry laced with a raw vulnerability that mirrored the sadness he'd sensed in her. Elias felt a sudden rush of heat to his face, his mind scrambling for a professional response, yet something deep within him froze, captivated by the raw honesty of her query, the unspoken plea behind it. "You won't believe who took his side. This is just the start. It gets stronger." The silence that followed Serafina's disarmingly personal question stretched, becoming a tangible presence in the car, heavier than the lingering dampness. Elias's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the dark plastic. His mind, usually so clear and methodical, became a chaotic scramble. He tried to process the question, to parse its meaning, to understand why a complete stranger, however elegant and intriguing, would ask him something so intimate, so devoid of the usual professional distance. Was it genuine concern? A polite inquiry? Or something else entirely? A silent invitation he was too young or too naive to comprehend? His gaze flickered from her dark, searching eyes to the rearview mirror, then back to her, seeking an answer in her unreadable expression. Yet, despite the blankness, there was an intensity, an almost pleading quality in her gaze that held him captive. "Alone?" he finally managed, his voice a little hoarse, barely above a whisper. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of composure, to anchor himself back into the professional role he had cultivated. "Yes, ma'am. Just heading home after this. Long night, you know." He kept his tone as neutral as possible, professional, hoping to subtly steer the conversation back to the expected safe boundaries of a rideshare transaction. A faint, almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips, a wisp of breath that carried a quiet melancholy. Her eyes seemed to dim for a moment, and he saw a fleeting flash of something akin to disappointment, quickly masked, swiftly veiled by a practiced composure. She shifted in her seat, and the delicate scent of her perfume, which had filled the car with its ethereal warmth, seemed to deepen, becoming more pervasive, almost intoxicating, drawing him deeper into her orbit. "I see," she murmured, her voice softer still, laced with an emotion he couldn't quite place, a quiet resonance that hinted at unspoken burdens. She reached for the door handle, her movements slow, deliberate, as if each action required a conscious effort, a will against an unseen inertia. "Thank you again, Elias," she said, her voice a fragile thread woven into the profound silence. "For the ride." He watched her, a knot forming in the pit of his stomach. He felt a strange, illogical reluctance for her to leave, a baffling desire to prolong this unexpected encounter, to unravel the mystery she presented. The professional facade he usually maintained, the impenetrable barrier between driver and passenger, was cracking, revealing a vulnerability in himself he rarely showed, even to his closest friends. He found himself wanting to ask her if she was alone, wanting to offer. What? He didn't know. A quiet, undefined need resonated within him. She opened the door, and the cool, damp night air rushed in, dispelling the warmth and the perfume that had clung to the interior of his sedan. As she began to step out, she paused, one foot still inside the car, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe, a slender anchor. She turned back to him, her eyes, dark and luminous, fixed on his, a quiet desperation now clearly visible in their depths, stripped of their earlier masks. Her composure had fractured, revealing a raw, aching need. "Elias," she began, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper that seemed to echo in the quiet expanse of the night. "The gallery. It's a private collection tonight. A few pieces I'm considering for acquisition. It will take a while, and I confess after a long day and this relentless rain—" She trailed off, her gaze unwavering, a silent, almost desperate plea in her eyes that bypassed all logic and professionalism, speaking directly to something primal within him. Would you mind waiting just for an hour or so?" "I would, of course, compensate you generously for your time, more than generously." Elias blinked, his mind reeling, a sudden chaos of conflicting thoughts erupting within him. Wait for an hour? It was already nearly midnight. His psychology textbooks, the impending early morning classes, his much-needed sleep, his carefully cultivated routine, all of it screamed against the idea, against this blatant disruption. Yet something in her voice, in the raw, unvarnished vulnerability of her request, resonated with a part of him he rarely acknowledged, a deep well of empathy. It wasn't just about the extra money, though the thought of it was certainly appealing. It was the feeling that she needed him, not merely as a driver, but as a silent, understanding presence, a fleeting safeguard against the profound loneliness she had so subtly, yet so clearly, hinted at earlier. He hesitated, a fierce battle raging within him, a silent conflict between duty and an inexplicable pull. Logic dictated he should decline, politely but firmly. His schedule, his responsibility. But a deeper, unnameable instinct, a quiet current, pulled him in a different direction, towards the unknown. He saw the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her lower lip, the way her shoulders seemed to sag just a fraction, as if bearing an invisible weight, and the internal struggle shifted decisively. He felt himself yielding, a slow, inevitable surrender. "An hour?" he heard himself say, the words surprising even himself, the slight tremor in his voice betraying his internal conflict. "All right, I can wait, but are you sure you'll be all right in there? It's pretty late, and the gallery seems deserted." A small, genuine smile finally touched her lips, a radiant transformation that chased away some of the weariness that had clouded her features, illuminating her face with a quiet relief. "Yes, I'll be perfectly fine, more than fine. Thank you, Elias. Truly, you have no idea." She stepped out of the car, pulling the door shut with the soft click that resonated in the quiet night. He watched as she walked towards the illuminated entrance of the Whisperwood Gallery, her figure diminishing into the vastness of the modern building. She didn't look back. Elias sat in the silent car, the engine still running, its low hum the only sound. He checked his phone. It was 11:25 p.m. An hour felt like an eternity at this time of night, an expanse of unknown possibilities. He turned off the engine, plunging the car into an even deeper silence, broken only by the distant muffled sounds of the sleeping city. He leaned back in his seat, staring at the darkened building, wondering what exactly he had just agreed to. He was a driver, nothing more, a means to an end. Yet, her initial question, "Are you alone tonight?" and her subsequent vulnerable request felt like an invitation into something far more profound, a silent acknowledgement of something beyond the transactional, a tentative reach for shared humanity. He felt a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation, a nervous flutter in his chest. He pulled out his phone, not to scroll social media, but to simply hold it, its cool weight a grounding presence in the swirling uncertainty. He considered calling a friend to process this strange turn of events, but dismissed the thought. This felt too personal, too delicate to share. He just sat, waiting, the minutes crawling by with agonizing slowness, each tick of the clock amplifying the quiet tension in the air. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, he saw a light flicker on inside the gallery, illuminating a different section of the building, a large, expansive space he hadn't noticed from the outside. He assumed it was Serafina, moving through the exhibits, perhaps lost in quiet contemplation, or perhaps simply trying to escape the confines of her own thoughts, the weight of her unspoken burdens. He found himself wondering about her life, about the pain she carried, the loneliness she had so subtly articulated, the history etched into the elegant lines of her face. Another 30 minutes passed, each one stretching, distorting time. Elias checked the time again, 12:15 a.m. Still no sign of her. He felt a prickle of unease, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. Had she forgotten about him? Had she perhaps gone out a different exit, leaving him stranded in the dead of night? He considered getting out of the car, walking to the entrance, to check, to confirm, but dismissed the idea as unprofessional, a breach of the unspoken contract. He was here to wait, and that was all. He pulled out his psychology textbook, a heavy tome on cognitive behavioral therapy, and tried to focus on the dense paragraphs, to lose himself in academic jargon, but his mind kept drifting back to Serafina, to the warmth of her unexpected presence, the gentle scent of her perfume, the quiet intensity of her gaze. Suddenly, the front doors of the gallery swung open with a soft sigh of hydraulics, and Serafina emerged. She wasn't carrying anything, no briefcase, no portfolio, just a small, elegant clutch bag held loosely in one hand. She paused on the steps, taking a deep, almost theatrical breath of the cool night air, as if shedding the confines of the building, shaking off an invisible weight. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the deserted street, and then she saw his car, a beacon in the night. A faint smile, genuine and full of a quiet relief, touched her lips, transforming her face, chasing away the earlier weariness. She started walking towards him, her gait light, almost buoyant, as if a burden had been lifted. As she approached, Elias started the engine, the sudden rumble of the car breaking the profound silence that had enveloped them. He shifted into neutral, his hands resting on the wheel, a subtle tremor running through them. She opened the front passenger door again, and the familiar floral scent enveloped him once more. Richer now, more pronounced, a warm embrace in the cool night. "Thank you for waiting, Elias," she said, her voice clear, almost vibrant, as if the short time inside the gallery had revitalized her, breathing new life into her weary spirit. She settled into the seat, pulling the door shut with a soft click. "I truly, truly appreciate your patience, more than you know." "No problem at all," he replied, turning to look at her fully. The dashboard light casting a soft, ethereal glow on her face, highlighting the faint, delicate lines at the corners of her eyes, a testament to years lived, to emotions deeply felt, to experiences weathered. He noticed her eyes were brighter now, a subtle sparkle in their depths, reflecting the faint light. It was insightful, she said, her voice trailing off as she looked out the window, a thoughtful expression on her face. Art often is, don't you think? It holds a mirror to our souls, reflects what we often can't or won't see. She turned back to him, her gaze direct, unwavering, a new resolve in her eyes. Elias, I have another request, if you wouldn't mind indulging me further. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a strange mix of apprehension and exhilaration. Another request? His rational mind, the voice of caution, urged him to be wary, to maintain distance, but the unexpected burgeoning connection that had been forged in the last hour, the silent understanding, pushed him to listen, to succumb to the undeniable pull. Yes, ma'am, he managed, his voice a little strained. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a low, intimate tone, almost a confiding whisper, as if sharing a profound secret. I have no desire to go home just yet. Not tonight, not to that empty house. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, held his, full of an unvarnished honesty that disarmed him completely, shattering his remaining professional barriers. And I have no one to go to. She paused, a pregnant silence hanging between them, amplifying the weight of her confession. Would you be willing to simply drive? Anywhere? Just for a little while longer? I'll pay for the time, of course, whatever you think is fair. Or perhaps, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, the fragile thread of her courage almost breaking, perhaps you could join me for a cup of coffee? There's a quiet place. The Crimson Mug, a few blocks from here, on Hawthorne Lane, that's open late. Just for a moment of quiet company? Her words hung in the air, echoing the first disarming question. Are you alone tonight? This wasn't just about a ride anymore. This was about profound loneliness, about a shared human need for connection, however fleeting, however impossible in the grand scheme of things. Elias felt the full, overwhelming weight of her vulnerability, and with it, a profound sense of responsibility. A call to respond not as a driver, but as one human being to another. This was no longer a simple fare. This was an invitation into a fragile, intimate space, a silent, desperate plea for solace in the vastness of the night. What happens now, no one expected. But it's what restores fairness. The invitation, so delicately offered, so laden with unsaid meaning, to simply drive, or more poignantly, to join her for coffee, hung in the air, a delicate, almost palpable thing between them. Elias stared at Serafina, his mind a sudden, furious current, a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. His internal clock screamed at him, urging him to go home, to rest, to prepare for his early morning classes. His professional duty, a quiet, insistent voice, urged him to maintain distance, to politely decline, to retreat to the safety of the transactional. But something deeper, an insistent, undeniable tug in his chest, urged him otherwise. He saw the naked vulnerability in her eyes, the quiet desperation that belied her composed, elegant exterior, and it resonated with a part of him he rarely allowed to surface. It wasn't a come-on. It was something far more profound, a plea for connection, a raw human need laid bare in the muted glow of the car's interior. He imagined her returning to an empty house, the vastness of the night amplifying her profound solitude, the hollow echo of her own footsteps. He remembered his own moments of loneliness, the quiet, persistent ache that sometimes accompanied his solitary student life, the gnawing feeling of being adrift in a big city. And in that moment, the carefully constructed lines blurred, dissolving into the shared human experience of yearning. He wasn't just a driver, He was a human being witnessing another's quiet suffering, and something within him compelled him to respond. "The crimson mug, you said, on Hawthorne Lane?" Elias finally spoke, his voice surprisingly steady, a quiet affirmation that sealed his decision, a surrender to the unexpected. He felt a profound shift within him, a crossing of an invisible boundary, a step into something undefined, potentially fraught with complexity, yet undeniably compelling. A soft, relieved sigh escaped Serafina's lips, a barely audible exhalation that conveyed a wealth of unspoken gratitude. A genuine, radiant smile illuminated her face, transforming her features from weary elegance to almost youthful beauty, chasing away the shadows that had clung to her. "Yes, it's small but cozy. They make a wonderful jasmine tea, the best in Oakhaven, I think." She paused, her gaze softening further, reaching out to him with an unspoken, heartfelt "thank you." "Thank you, Elias. Truly. You don't know what this means, what this single gesture means to me right now." He nodded, a small, almost shy smile touching his own lips, a mirror of her relief. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, heading in the direction she'd indicated for the crimson mug. The rain had completely stopped, and the streetlights now reflected in the wet asphalt like scattered diamonds, shimmering and alive. The air felt cleaner, lighter, as if the storm had washed away not just the grime of the city, but also some of the internal resistance he had been battling, some of the quiet anxieties that often accompanied his solitary existence. The Crimson Mug was indeed a small, unassuming cafe nestled on a quiet side street called Hawthorne Lane, its warm, inviting glow a beacon in the still night. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting, earthy aroma of roasted coffee and old books, a blend that felt both familiar and comforting. There were only a few other patrons, their hushed conversations murmuring in the background like a gentle river. They found a small, secluded table in a corner, bathed in the soft, intimate light of a single hanging lamp, its glow casting long, dancing shadows on the wall. Once they were seated, Serafina ordered her jasmine tea, its delicate aroma already wafting towards them, and Elias, feeling a rare surge of adventure, opted for a strong black coffee, the kind that promised to cut through the lingering fatigue. The barista, a young woman with a sleepy but friendly demeanor and tired eyes, brought their drinks, and the soft clinking of the mugs on the worn wooden tables seemed to punctuate the quiet intimacy that had settled between them, a fragile bubble in the vastness of the night. "So, Elias," Serafina began, her gaze thoughtful and unhurried as she cradled her teacup, the steam curling delicately around her elegant fingers. "Tell me about yourself. Beyond the driving, beyond the late nights, what are you studying? What dreams do you chase?" He found himself relaxing, the tension that had been coiled in his stomach slowly unraveling, melting away in the warmth of her presence. He told her about his psychology degree, about his burgeoning aspirations to work with troubled youth, to make a tangible difference in their lives, about the relentless challenges of balancing demanding work and rigorous studies. He spoke about his family, about growing up in a small, sleepy town upstate, far from the city's endless hum, about his move to this bustling metropolis for college, a leap of faith into the unknown. He even found himself sharing his anxieties about the ever-present student loans and the daunting, often overwhelming prospect of the future, a future that felt both exciting and terrifying. He spoke with a candor he rarely offered to anyone, let alone a virtual stranger he had picked up in the dead of night. Serafina listened intently, her dark eyes never leaving his face, a genuine curiosity burning in their depths. She offered small, understanding nods, soft murmurs of empathy, and the occasional insightful question that demonstrated a remarkable perceptiveness, a deep capacity for understanding that surprised him. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice, simply listened with an empathetic presence that made him feel entirely seen, entirely heard, as if she could peel back the layers of his carefully constructed exterior. Then it was her turn. She spoke of her work as an art consultant, her profound passion for discovering emerging artists, the beauty she found in creativity, in the raw, unbridled expression of the human spirit. But as she spoke, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her demeanor. Her voice, while still soft and melodic, carried an underlying current of melancholy, a quiet ache that resonated in the air. She spoke of her husband, William, an architect, a man of quiet strength and profound vision, who had passed away 3 years prior, unexpectedly, brutally. A car accident. The words were delivered with a quiet dignity, devoid of self-pity, yet the pain was palpable, a deep, abiding sorrow that seemed to emanate from her very being, a shadow that clung to her. "He was the anchor," she confessed, her voice dropping to a near whisper, almost a sigh, her gaze fixed on the swirling, cloudy patterns in her tea as if seeking answers within their depths. "My whole world, my entire universe revolved around him. And then, it didn't. It simply ceased to exist as I knew it. And I've been trying to find a new orbit ever since, a new gravitational pull, a reason to simply be." She looked up, her eyes meeting his, swimming with unshed tears, shimmering like jewels in the dim light. "The gallery tonight, it was one of his favorite places. He loved the abstract works, the ones that challenged perception, that forced you to look deeper. I sometimes go there late, when it's empty, when the echoes of the day have faded, just to feel him close, to feel his presence in the silence." Elias felt a profound wave of empathy wash over him, a deep, aching sorrow for her loss. The scattered pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a coherent, heartbreaking picture. Her late-night journey, her initial disarming question about loneliness, her subsequent, vulnerable plea for company. This wasn't a woman looking for casual connection. This was a soul grappling with immense crushing loss, reaching out tentatively for a flicker of human warmth in the vast, overwhelming emptiness of her grief. He realized the depth of her courage, her extraordinary bravery in being so open, so raw, so vulnerable with him, a young man she had only just met, a stranger from a rideshare app. He reached across the table, his hand hovering for a breathless moment before gently, almost instinctively, covering hers, which rested on the cool ceramic of her teacup. It was a spontaneous gesture, an instinctual response to her raw pain, devoid of any romantic overtone, any hidden agenda. It was simply human comfort, a silent acknowledgement of her profound suffering, a quiet offering of solace. Her fingers, cool against his, subtly tightened, a fragile, silent acceptance of his touch, a recognition of the unspoken understanding passing between them. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Serafina," he murmured, his voice thick with genuine sorrow, a roughness he hadn't known he possessed. I can't even begin to imagine the depth of that pain." She gave him a weak, grateful smile, her eyes glistening, a single tear tracing a silent path down her cheek. "Thank you, Elias. Just thank you for listening, for simply being here." She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, her thumb lightly, almost imperceptibly, caressed the back of his hand, a small, comforting gesture that sent a jolt of warmth through him, a strange, electric current that ran through his entire being. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the shared vulnerability creating a bond that transcended their age difference and their unexpected meeting, bridging the chasm between their lives. The coffee shop felt like a small, protected bubble against the vast, indifferent night, a haven where pain could be acknowledged and solace found. He learned more about William, about their life together, their shared dreams, their quiet joys. He learned about Serafina's quiet strength, her remarkable resilience in the face of such profound, devastating loss. He saw not just a beautiful, mature woman, but a soul scarred by grief, yet still profoundly capable of warmth, of connection, of a deep, abiding humanity. As the hour crept past 1 a.m., the barista, with a polite, almost apologetic air, began to subtly clear tables, signaling closing time, a gentle but firm reminder of the outside world. Elias felt a familiar pang of reluctance, a quiet ache. This connection, born of chance and sorrow, was drawing to a close, and he wasn't ready to let it go. Serafina seemed to sense it too. She squeezed his hand gently, before slowly, reluctantly withdrawing hers, the warmth lingering on his skin. "It's late, Elias," she said, her voice soft but firm, tinged with a delicate regret. "You have classes in the morning. I shouldn't keep you, not a moment longer." He nodded, a lump forming in his throat, a tightness he couldn't swallow away. He wanted to offer to drive her home, to ensure she wasn't alone, to somehow protect her from the vast, empty silence that awaited her. But he also knew the boundaries, the inherent impossibility of anything more, the precariousness of their connection. This moment, this shared vulnerability, was precious precisely because it was fleeting, unexpected, a fragile gift. They rose from the table, and as they walked towards the exit of the Crimson Mug, their shoulders brushed, a brief electric contact that sent a shiver through him. She paused at the door, turning to face him fully. The subtle scent of her perfume, now intertwined with the comforting aroma of coffee, lingered in the air around them, a potent memory. "Thank you, Elias," she said again, her voice low, filled with an emotion that bordered on reverence, a profound gratitude that touched him deeply. Her eyes, luminous in the soft light of the cafe, held his gaze, unwavering, searching. There was a quiet intensity, a recognition of the profound, unspoken bond that had formed between them in the silent hours of the night. Her hand, almost instinctively, reached out, her fingers hovering inches from his arm, as if she yearned to touch him one last time, to solidify the fragile connection they had forged, to etch it into existence. She didn't touch him. Her hand slowly lowered, a silent acknowledgement of the invisible barriers between them, the unbridgeable chasm of age and circumstance. But her gaze never faltered. He saw the unspoken words in her eyes. "I've been waiting for this, for someone to truly see me, for someone to simply listen." And in his own gaze, he knew with absolute certainty she saw his understanding, his empathy, his quiet admiration for her strength, for her enduring spirit. He walked her to his car, opening the passenger door for her with a quiet dignity. As she settled in, she looked at him once more, her expression soft, almost wistful. "Be safe, Elias," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a gentle benediction. "You too, Serafina," he replied, his voice rough with emotion, a quiet sincerity that belied his youth. He closed the door and she watched him as he walked around to the driver's side. He got in, started the engine, and then, before putting the car in gear, he met her gaze in the rearview mirror. A silent promise passed between them, a shared memory of an unexpected night, a raw, honest connection that transcended the roles they played, the conventions of their lives. He knew with absolute certainty that this night, this woman, had changed something fundamental within him, leaving an indelible mark. He drove her home, the silence in the car now imbued with a different kind of meaning, a quiet understanding, a profound resonance. He dropped her off at Atherton Row, under the soft glow of the porch light, and as she stepped out, she gave him one last lingering look, a silent thank you that spoke volumes. He watched until the door to her grand Victorian home closed, then slowly, thoughtfully, he drove away. The scent of jasmine and coffee still clinging to the interior of his car, a potent, beautiful reminder of a night where human connection had broken through the silence of the city and the solitude of two souls, leaving the air between them undeniably different, charged with the lingering warmth of a profound, albeit fleeting, closeness.